Hey, I'm Pep, and this is a Pep Talk. Now today, we're going to talk about solo games, playing games by yourself, how to make some games solo that aren't normally solo, stuff like that. So, first of all, the most obvious thing to talk about is, well, if you're at home, you're by yourself, and you don't want to play games online, well, maybe you can find a game that you can play solo. Now, quite a few games are either built to be solo. There are some games that are literally solo. You might even think about buying a puzzle, completing a puzzle. Puzzles are more fun than you might imagine. Now, of course, there's other games like Charterstone that are not made necessarily to be a solo game, but it says 1 to 6 players in the box because it includes solo rules. Now, a lot of cooperative games, even if they don't specifically say that they are solo games, can basically be played solo. Instead of playing 3 characters with 3 different people, just play all 3 characters yourself. Pathfinder, the adventure card game, is a good example of this. I'm not 100% sure that it doesn't actually say. Maybe it does say 1 to 4 players. But normally you wouldn't think to play a game like that by yourself. Instead, you'd probably play with a couple people, and you usually wouldn't want to run 1 character anyway. Even if you do play that, I don't suggest playing as a character. I suggest playing as 2 characters. That way you get a little bit of different mechanics going on, you can build them. The game's just a little more interesting that way. Now, on the other side of things, there's some games that aren't made to be played solo. They don't have solo rules, but if you look hard enough online, you can often find that some people have made up solo rules. And listen, if you're sitting here playing games by yourself, maybe you have some extra time that you don't know what to do with. Well, maybe figure out some way to play the game solo anyway. Maybe you really enjoy Blood Rage and you think, I wish I could just play Blood Rage by myself. And hopefully that isn't something that already has solo rules because I'll feel silly. But maybe you think, okay, well, I'll set up a system where there's kind of an AI, just set up an extra player, and that player's stuff will automatically do this each round. A lot of the solo games that have like an automa, I think that's mostly a Stonemaier Games thing. Automa? Anyway, we'll often have a deck of cards where basically as you play out the cards each round, it'll kind of tell you what those computer opponents will do. Now, of course, another option that you have, and an option I really enjoy, is if you're playing a game that is not cooperative, that is actually, let's say something like Blood Rage, and you're playing by yourself, you have the option of just playing as multiple people. It doesn't take having an actual, disorder, like split personalities. I don't know if disorder is the right word. I apologize if it's not. But something along those lines, you can do it without that. Instead, act, talk to yourself. And I know some people might hear, sit there and talk to yourself as just being a little bit too far gone for them. But listen, if you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons or even thought about role-playing before, maybe you've thought about acting, maybe you've been in plays, you're going to be used to just talking to yourself, talking out loud, even doing a back-and-forth banter so you can remember lines, whatever. So try doing that when you play a board game. Set it up as if you're playing with 3 people. I really suggest not going above 3 for the first time. And play it out. But it's not that simple. You probably want to make different personalities for all of these characters, especially if you're supposed to have hidden information, like if you're supposed to have hidden hands. What I find is best to do is just to lay all the hands out, unless you want to get up and move and check the hands each time, which is also interesting. But you want to have different personalities so that you can kind of set rules to make it so the extra information that you're learning doesn't matter as much. Perhaps one person plays as worst case scenario. They always assume that their opponents have something that will hurt or counter them, so they play accordingly. and perhaps another person plays the opposite. They always assume that nobody has anything that can interrupt them, and they just play and try to combo off with absolutely no restraint. And maybe you play as another person who works off of the information they have, and you just play them as a person who's really good at predicting things. So the fact that they know everything is fine because they probably would know everything in that actual situation, or they'd at least play as if they did. And of course, you don't have to only do it that way. You can just play hyper-aggressive people. You can play as someone who's very conservative. You can play as someone who just does whatever would be the silliest thing to do in that moment. That's my favorite because when you're at a game night, a lot of times you have at least one person who doesn't always make the most optimal decisions. Instead, they do the most fun decisions. So have at least one of your characters playing that way. Now, the thing is, when it comes to solo games, there's a couple extra things we need to talk about. And it's not necessarily about the games. It's more about, well, how do you play them? Now, if you aren't actually alone, if you have other people there, but they just don't want to play games with you, or you want to have your own experience without them, it's probably good to either A, have your own separate area. Like, don't set it up on the kitchen table if you don't think you can finish the game. So have your own separate area, or something that you can move around and like pull the game up and move it aside if people need to use that space. Especially for a longer game. If you're settling in for something like Charterstone. Charterstone? I don't know why I wasn't sure if it was called Charterstone for a second. I can actually see it in the mirror in front of me too. So Charterstone, you don't necessarily need to like keep it out of the box because it has a bunch of individual sessions, but it's better to be able to leave it out, and that gives you more incentive to finish it. So if you have a space, your own personal space, a big table area you can set it up on, I suggest doing that. That way it's there. Whenever you want to come and play it again, you don't have to think about resetting the game up. And on top of that, if it is a game with scenarios, before you finish, set up the next scenario. Because when you're playing a game, you usually have more of a drive and incentive to do that kind of thing. Whereas when you're thinking, oh, I want to play again, sometimes you don't have that drive to actually set the game up. You think, if the game was already there and set up, I would play it, but I don't want to go through the setup right now. So if you can, try to set it up ahead of time, each scenario, and leave it out. Now, on the other way, if it's a game that will only take an hour and a half, 2 hours, try to make sure you have that time and try to turn it into an experience. You know, if you're going to be playing it by yourself anyway, make sure to get yourself a drink, maybe some snacks, preferably some snacks that are board game friendly, that don't leave marks or grease or whatever. Maybe some Skittles. Skittles do have the powdered sugar, but that probably wouldn't hurt a game. Anyway, getting off topic. So make it into an experience. Make sure that you have the time. If you're pretty sure you're going to get interrupted in about half an hour or an hour, maybe don't actually start the game yet. Wait until after you're sure you're not really going to have interruptions. It's the same advice I'd give to someone who's trying to sit down and really watch a movie, you know. Turn the lights off, get yourself a drink and snacks so that you don't have to get up, you know. Have a pee break before the movie starts. And just make sure you don't have any reason to need to stop the movie. Because a lot of times, and I know a lot of people need to kind of stop and do other things because it's just the way people's brains are built, the way some people work. But if that's not you and you have the opportunity and the ability to just sit there and watch it, play it because it's a game, not a movie, I suggest doing it because it's an entirely different experience. As I said, it's the same with watching a movie. You know, you can say you get the same experience from watching a movie in little half-hour bursts over the course of 2 or 3 days, but you really don't. The filmmaker doesn't design a movie to be watched that way, usually. Usually they design it to be watched in one solid chunk because it builds the emotion, then maybe like drops the emotion, then builds it again. And that's important for some things. And for games, it's the same way. a lot of times the acts of games are built differently. If you actually just played through like the first 2 rounds of a 6-round game, it might be boring and stale. Like some games take a little bit of time to kind of get going. So if your experience for that day was playing the first 2 rounds of a game, I don't think that's going to be fun. You're basically just kind of half prepping a strategy. I think you really want to be able to play it all the way through. And on the other hand, don't ignore important things happening around you. If somebody needs your help, if somebody, just needs someone to talk to, don't be like, I'm in the middle of playing this game. Try to set aside the time, but be flexible, be willing to change. Especially if you're playing a longer game. If you decide that you want to play Charterstone, don't sit there for 10 hours straight and try to play the game. There's other people in your life, and if there happens to be some sort of global event going on that causes a lot of stress for people and might be dangerous for some people, you probably shouldn't be unavailable for 10 hours of a day. You should probably be available in case someone needs to call, in case something bad happens, in case someone needs help. So that's my advice on that. I don't have too much else to say about solo games. I'm not going to give you a bunch of examples of solo games either. I might do that in another video, but in this video I more wanted to talk about just ideas for how to play them. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. I don't know what made me think to say that. I don't think I've said it in like any other video. But anyway, thanks for watching. If you play a lot of solar games, and you want to talk about them in the comments below, that'd be awesome. I'd love to hear suggestions. I'm the type of person who doesn't really like solo games, so maybe if you've got that one game that you think someone who doesn't even like solo games would enjoy, feel free to drop it in. Give some suggestions for solo games to other people, or give some suggestions of other ways to play solo games, to prepare, etc. Just talk in the comments below, and I'll respond, and other people will respond. It'll be a good time. We'll have fun. Come out to the coast. It'll be a good time. I don't think I'm doing that line right. Anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, live free, game hard. Especially if you're playing by yourself. Wait, it's probably not necessary. You could probably, do it. If you're playing a solo game, treat it seriously. Pretend you're playing as if someone else was there. If you have a competitive spirit and you're not able to play with other people right now, embrace that competitive spirit. Compete with yourself. If you're going to play multiple times, try to beat your old score. Try to beat it by a lot. Heck, maybe if you are playing a game that's relatively fast, not only try to beat your score, try to beat your time. I recently watched people doing speed runs of Minecraft and Stardew Valley. Just do the same thing. Try to see the fastest you can get through a game and like what kind of score you can get, and try to make some sort of achievement. If the game doesn't already come with achievements, I don't remember if this one does, make your own little achievements. The most this you've had in a particular round, the fastest you've got to a particular building, something. I said goodbye and then kept rambling, so I am going to say goodbye again. Tricked ya.